just a quick reminder from what we were talking about was the top three complaints.
Yep.
That we don't listen, we waste their time, we're kind of the main things. And where that comes from is that people tend to communicate one thing when they actually mean something else. So the example that I used was saying that they wanted to buy a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights. You go show them homes that are high on a hill with a view of the city lights. They don't want it, they end up buying something tucked away in a canyon, surrounded by nothing but trees, and we then as agents are left saying like. Buyers are liars because they said they wanted this, then they went and bought that. But the main thing where that comes from is just, again, 10% of who we are is conscious, 90% is unconscious. The conscious part is where it's logical, rational, reasonable. Down here is where the emotion is. Buying a home is more of an emotional purchase than a logical. And so they try their best to explain what it is they want, but they don't really know how to say it. And if you remember from Brenda Lee saying on the last class, so that I'll know it when I see it. And what they're saying from that is, I have the information here, is I just don't know how to explain it to you in a way that would make sense. So they do their very best, but what they end up doing then is describing for us some features of the house, but it's not really the feature they want, it's the benefit that that feature provides is what they're looking for in the home. But they tell it to us as features. Well, then they go buy something that doesn't match what they initially told us, like the home high on the hill with the view of the city lights. They go buy the one in the canyon. Well, we're looking at the feature, but really it's because the benefit that feature had still worked for them. So our job then becomes, we need to take and help people through this process of taking this information that is stored in these discrete locations where you've got the pictures in one area, the decisions they have in another area, and then the feelings in another area. Oops. The feelings are in this other area. Well, when those three things reintegrate is what we call then crystallization. And nobody's going to crystallize, nobody's going to buy until they crystallize. So our job really is, we need to help people through this crystallization process. Now, the other thing that happens with this that I didn't talk about last week is that it also creates a scenario where there's a huge amount of connection or rapport built with the person or the people that you're meeting with, which is a huge side benefit to us doing it. But that's not what we're not doing it for that reason. We're doing it with the idea of helping them crystallize. And once you help somebody crystallize, what that does then is creates this scenario for them where they're now unable to buy, but they recognize that you are the one that helped them to do that. Therefore, they become very committed to you as an agent. So the quick story that I have of the very first time I did this. So when I got trained on this process, I actually flew to the San Francisco Bay Area because the guy that was doing the training wasn't offering it here in Utah. In fact, when I met him, he had done a training here in Utah, but the company that I was with at the time that he did it for, there weren't really a whole lot of agents that were very interested, I guess. But I was hugely interested. And so I went to him and said, hey, I want more of this training and stuff that you're doing. And he said, well, if you'll fly to California, I won't charge you for the training. So you just get there and I'll let you attend. So I did. I went through the training, and in the training, when I went through this, was me as an agent. My broker went with me. So she was there to learn this process from the standpoint of recruiting. Then there was a financial planner that was there and an insurance guy. And then I can't remember who the other guy was, but there was us that were there, and we learned and went through this process. Well, after I learned it, I came home. First thing I did is sat down with my wife and was like, let me show you what I learned. And I said, describe for me your ideal home. And she started to tell me about it. And then pretty soon she was like, this is weird. Like if somebody did this to me, like I would be like, I don't want to work with you. So it panicked me big time because I was like,
excited.
I was all excited. She was like, this is weird. But so I called up the guy and I said, okay, help me figure out what I'm doing wrong. Like I understood it. It seemed like it would work when I was there in California, but now all of a sudden I'm back here in Utah and I'm panicked because I sat down with my wife and he told me this was weird. Now, so we then went to, what I talked about last week was tool number 1. Which was the directives. So with the directives then is going to be described for me. Tell me about. Share with me. Or help me understand. Okay. Okay, so before that though, when I came back here and I called up the guy, and was like, why is this not, why is my wife being like, this is weird? And he reminded me, which we haven't talked about this yet, but the first thing that you want to do before you're going to do this with somebody is you need to get permission. So the first thing that we want to do is get permission. Now I'm going to give you a paper today that has the permission script on the top of it. But basically what we're wanting to say is, you know, in order for us to determine whether or not I can help you, I need to ask you some questions, and the questions might be things you haven't thought about, maybe even make you a little uncomfortable, maybe things you haven't considered before. Is that going to be okay? Well, so part of it was I was asking these questions that was then making my wife feel a little uncomfortable. And he said, but you forgot to get permission and tell her up front, hey, some of the questions that I have might be things you haven't considered, might even make you uncomfortable a little bit. Is that going to be okay? So I said, okay, great. And he said, I promise it'll work. Just go do it with a client. So I get my first client that I'm going to sit down and take through this process. And which I always called it a probing is what I would refer to it as. So I'm going to sit down with this client to probe. And I sat down with them in my office at the office that I was working at. And I said, describe for me your ideal home. They went through and described what they were looking for in a home. I then did the other piece of this, which is the prompters. And the prompters are what else? Keep going. Stay more. Those type of things. Okay. So I did that. So as they're talking, and also just as a reminder, we've got, and I'm going to give you this grid, but looks something like this. And as they're describing features, I'm then writing down the different features here. So if it was the kitchen, they talked about, I'm going to write down the kitchen. And when it was backyard, I would always just do BY backyard. So you can develop your own shorthand because the notes you take on this are for you, not for them. So I just would do, you know, they talked about the backyard. If they talked about the garage, you know, I would put the garage here. If they talked about the basement, I put it there, wherever. And it doesn't really matter, but you just fill in as they're talking about these different features. And then we would just say, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep going. You know, hey, I'm getting a great picture. What else? So we always want to give them some positive feedback of what they're doing, which that helps to make it not feel awkward, I guess, is just by saying, hey, you're doing a really good job. What else would you want to have in this home? What else would you?
Instead of just what else? What else? What else?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Which that's where I think it felt awkward was the what else versus just, hey, you're doing a really good job. Tell me more.
Because then
Hey.
they're just digging to get you to stop saying what else.
Yeah, but also what we're doing is we're getting them then to dig down though into what are the things that they want. So once we've done that, and when we're going to know we're done filling out this grid is once they say, I don't know what else to tell you. I can't think of anything else. Once they've done that is when we're going to then go to the next piece of this. So from tool number 1, we're going to come over here to tool number 2. Tool number 2 is what I call modifiers. Now, before we do that though, and I mentioned this last time, is before we move to this, we've got all this stuff written down here, is then I'm going to ask them, what are the 2 or the 3 most important things? So of everything you've talked about. So I'm going to, after we've filled the grid, they've said that's about it. I'm going to say, hey, I've got a really good picture. Of everything we talked about though, what are the 2 or the 3 most important? And again, just a reminder on the benefits, they buy in 2s and 3s. So if they don't have 2 or 3 of those, they're not gonna buy it. So I'm gonna ask them, what are the 2 or the 3 most important things? And they're then gonna tell me 2 or 3 things. Once they do that, then I usually just will circle those on the grid. Now that we've got that, then I can say, okay, of those 2 or 3, which one would be the most important? They're gonna tell me, they say kitchen, great, which one would be next most important? They say the basement, and then by default, the backyard would be number 3. So now that we've got those 2 or 3, we're gonna now come over here to these modifiers and use those. Now, the modifiers are gonna be who, what, when, where, and how. Okay, so you'll notice I left one out. So we're gonna do who, what, when, where, how. We don't do the why. And the reason we don't do why at this point is, and I think I said this, but just in case I didn't. Really, tool number 1 is designed around accessing this part of the brain. Tool number 2 is around the decisions part of the brain. Tool number 3, which is the why, is designed around getting to the feelings. So here's the problem. If you ask a why question here, now, this isn't totally true, by the way. There are times you can use why here, but if you use a why question too soon during this, what you'll get is, well, it's just what I want. It'd just be perfect. It'd be exactly what we need.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to help you and it tells you they haven't crystallized. So really, we don't want to ask any why questions of why do you want that until we have taken them through the process and they have crystallized. Now, once they've crystallized, when you say, why do you want it? They're then going to tell you one of the benefits, which we'll get to in just a minute here. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take, based on the 2 or 3 things they've given me, and I'm going to ask them these who, what, when, where, how questions. Now, for me, how I do the transition on this is I would say, so let's say that they said the kitchen was their most important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, so Jordan, picture yourself in the kitchen. So you'll notice I'm giving them really, this is back to a directive again, is I'm taking the kitchen, probably this is the way I would say it, is let's just take this box here that's going to represent the kitchen. And I'm going to say, I'm going to start with a directive. So I'm going to say, Jordan, picture yourself in the kitchen and tell me what you see. They're then going to start to talk again on about the kitchen. They're going to say, well, it's going to have so many cabinets and it's going to have, it'll be this big and it'll have these, whatever. Like they're just going to tell me about the kitchen. As they do that, I'm paying attention to questions that I could ask that would be who, what, when, where, how questions. So for example, if they said to me, well, so I say, picture yourself in the kitchen, tell me what you see. And they say, well, I can see, me being able to be cooking dinner when the kids get home from school and they're going to come in and they're going to sit down and we're going to start talking about their day and what's gone on with school and maybe doing homework and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So as they're talking about that, then I'm going to say, I'm going to ask them, in that scenario, I might not start with a who because they already kind of told me who, but I may say, what time does that take place? And, they'll tell me what time, or I may say, what would the layout of the kitchen need to look like for you to be able to be cooking while the kids are talking to you? So I'm just going to ask these questions that are who, what, when, where, how. Now, let's say though, as part of that, the kitchen that they talked about, that it has to have a certain kind of cabinets or so many cabinets, they'll usually say words like, well, it needs to have a lot of space. Okay, well, so that's the kind of thing I'm going to come back on these modifiers to asking is, you mentioned there needs to be a lot of space. What's a lot of space? And they're either going to tell me, or they're going to say, I don't know, just enough room that I could, but whatever it is. So I'm going to just ask, so who would be using the kitchen? Where would it be in relation to the rest of the house? Sorry. something,
Bless you.
some dust or something, I don't know what. I didn't see a bug flying around, so I don't need it. I don't know if it was dust or what, but. Okay, so I'm gonna ask, how do you use it? How often do you use it? We already did the where, when do you use it? What would the arrangement? How many cabinets? What type of cabinets? What color would it need to be? So you'll notice, so back to this, is I'm asking them all these decisions that are made within, and let me give you an example of that. So my first house, when we had it built, it had a light over the kitchen sink. Did I tell you this already? I feel like I said this recently, but I don't remember who or where, but it had a light over the kitchen sink. Well, we then sell that house, we build a new house, and when we move into that new house, one of the first things that I noticed when I went to do the dishes is there was no light over the kitchen sink, and I'm like, oh, I feel like it's so dark. And so that would be an example, though, of something that when they're living in the house currently, they've got some things that they've kind of made these mental notes that they might not have, right at the top of their head. They may or may not, depends on how much they've thought about it. But the idea of this is trying to figure out what are those things that they have decided about the house that it's gotta have. Now,
Is part of that so that when you do walk through houses, you can say like, hey, don't let the light above the sink be a determining factor, because we can add one of those in.
so yes and no, like, so to some extent, yes. And the reason I say yes and no on it is because what's gonna happen, and I don't know if I've said this yet, but what's gonna happen as you take them through this process is they go from focusing on the feature to, once they understand what why they want that feature, they can then be open to other features. So now, part of why I say yes is because there may be some things like, again, that light over the sink for me. That one is one that is crucial that if we liked everything else about the house and you were to point out of like, hey, now keep in mind, like if you found me saying, as you were showing me a house and I'm saying, yeah, but there's just no light over the sink. Yeah, then you would be able to say, well, hey, let's make an offer and ask the seller as part of our offer that they install one. Or that we just say, well, after you get moved in, I'll get you an electrician to come out.
It's not like having to knock a wall down.
Yeah, so some of those things, but part of why I say yes and no again on that is more no than yes. Meaning more so, we just want to focus on the feature. The benefit, not the feature. So, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's say we did the kitchen here is what we were talking about. And you start asking the questions of like, so picture yourself in the kitchen, tell me what you see, and they start talking about the kids and da, 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 da. Well, so you're asking them, well, what are you gonna be using the kitchen for? And they say, well, we're gonna, I'll be cooking, the kids are gonna do homework. And we're gonna be able to be talking about their day and blah, blah, blah. Well, then, once we've gone through and asked these questions, so now, in fact, let me even say this. You're typically, for each of these features, the 2 or 3 that they've talked about, you want to ask between 5 and 7 who, what, when, where, how. And it can be any combination of these, or it could even be a directive as well. So meaning, when I said, picture yourself in the kitchen and tell me what you see, that would be 1. Even though it's a directive, that would be 1 of my 5 to 7. Now, there's not really any magic in the number of questions that they ask, that you ask of them. What's important, again, I'm going to keep coming back to this, and I think I said this last week, I'm going to keep coming back over and over and over again. The main thing you need to remember out of this whole thing we're talking about, we're trying to cause crystallization, because until they crystallize, they won't buy. So just keep that in mind as I say this. So really, the number of questions that I ask here is only important to that number based on getting them to crystallize. So meaning there are times you could potentially only ask 1 or 2 questions, but there's also times where I've asked 10 or 15 questions about the feature in this process of getting them to crystallize. So again, I've just found on average, you're typically gonna need to ask 5 to 7. And the reason I bring that up is most people. So in fact, for a while, and I'll still do this actually, but for a long time, when I first started doing this training, I actually would tell agents, we did the thing called certification, that they had to be certified in probing. And so what I would do is I would say to them, in order to be certified, you have to get a real potential client to come in here to the office. I will sit down with you and take you, or not take you through, but watch, observe the process. So we would have the agents come in and tell their client that I was new. So I'm a brand new agent, you were training me. And I would observe you doing this process. Well, as I did it, what I observed is most agents would ask 1 or 2 questions and move on, rather than saying, okay, I need to ask between 5 and 7 questions in order to get this crystallization to occur. So hopefully what you're getting from me saying this is you got to ask more questions than you probably think you need to ask in order to get them to crystallize.
So last night I showed some homes to some clients of mine.
Yeah.
They've been dragging their feet all summer long. They still won't get the pre-approval done because he wants to make sure the numbers are realistic before he gets credit pulled.
Yeah.
But it's a $400,000 land or townhome, and he's got 60 grand to put down, and they both work full time. So I'm like, we're not gonna have an issue here.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, well, I'll take you just to show you some, but after that, we gotta get you pre-approved if you wanna look at more.
Yeah, good.
And while we were there, the first one they liked, they thought it was good, and then we went to another one in the same neighborhood that is a brand new build, nobody's ever lived in it. And they loved it, and we're even talking about trying to get them a 2-1 buy down. So like the numbers are even better than he thought they would be originally, but he's still just like, that their biggest thing is they wanna move out of Utah within the next 1 to 2 years. But he's like, so I don't wanna be stuck here waiting the 2 years for capital gains. Because they wanna rent it out after, and so he knows he has to live in it for 2 years before he can rent it out. But she's like ready to go. She's like, this is done, we've been waiting too long, like, I don't wanna do this anymore, let's just put an offer in, and he's dragging his feet. So. I'm trying to think like through this process, I feel like for him, it's way much more about logistics rather than the house, because when she walked through it, she's like, this is everything we need, this is perfect. But-
So yeah, so what I hear you saying is she's crystallized,
Yes,
he has not.
he's not.
And so that's what your objective needs to be, is to get him to crystallize. So what I would do, and once we go through, which we're getting close to jumping into here in a second, is once we go through the benefits, and I'm gonna give you the 15 benefit words. As we go through and talk about those 15 benefits, what I would say is ultimately it sounds like. And I emphasize the sounds like, because until you take them through this process, you don't really know. But it sounds like to me that probably what he's looking at is value, is probably the benefit word that hasn't connected on him for whatever reason. But
Well, and that's what I just completely stopped talking about the house, and started talking to him about investment.
Yeah.
About like,
good,
and cause he's an accountant.
Yeah.
And so I was just talking numbers. I'm like,
perfect.
dude, if you live in this for 2 years and then move away and come back in 4 years, like 2 years after that, you've got $50,000-$60,000 of equity probably. In this property, plus the 50 or 60 you're putting down.
Yeah.
Like you've got $100,000 of cash, you could either keep renting it or you can pull it out, buy something else, and rates will go down, you refinance and you can rent it for more, you start cash flowing. Like that's where I went at him. Because I don't think he cared about the house.
Right.
He liked the house. He's like,
Exactly.
yeah, that's great, whatever.
Yep.
But then it just went like pure logistics.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. In fact, as you're saying that, I almost wonder did you come to the base camp that Christopher Jensen did, where he
Yes.
basically, like we've got that on our YouTube channel. I would almost say it might be worth, and you'll know better than me, but it might be worth sending him the link of saying, here's why I think it's smart for you to buy. Because where he's a numbers guy, he would probably eat up what Christopher did and be like, yeah, we need to buy.
Yeah.
So, anyway, yeah, good. All right, so any other questions on this part? Does it make sense of what we're saying? Okay, well, so once we've done that, so once I've done this and said, okay. Picture yourself in the kitchen, tell me what you see, who's gonna use it, what's the layout gonna look like, what type of furniture, depending on the room, what furniture, or in this case, in the kitchen, what appliances and how would they be laid out and what would it look like? And how would it feel, and not feel, I guess, but how would you use it? Who's gonna use it? How often? What types of things? All of those questions. Once we've done that, and again, minimum of typically 5 to 7. Then what's gonna happen is we'll go from tool number 2 over here to tool number 3. Which tool number 3 is what I call the tag. And the tag is where we're now gonna get to the benefit, okay? And the tag sounds like, what does blank mean to you? Okay, so I'm gonna ask them, what does having that kitchen mean to you? So after they've sat and explained it to me, told me about all the kitchen, blah, 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 I'm gonna say, what does having that kitchen mean to you? Or I may say it as why, this is where the why comes into play. Why is blank important? Now, for me, the way I usually do this, if I'm gonna do it as why is it important? Is I start with what does having that kitchen mean to you? And then if they say something like, oh, it would just be great because, be able to spend time with my kids and have my kids sitting there while I'm doing cooking dinner or whatever, whatever they're doing. And you can then say, okay, well, so why is that important? Why is having the kids right there that important while you're doing that kind of stuff? Then is when they're usually gonna either say the benefit word or they're gonna talk around the benefit word. So in that case, if they had said, what does, you asked, what does having that kitchen mean to you? Oh, it would just be great because it would be the chance for my kids when they get home and I to sit down and connect, but they could be doing their homework and telling me about their day while I'm preparing dinner or whatever it is, they're doing. And then you go, okay, that's great. I can understand that. Why is that important to have that time? And that's when they're gonna then that's when the crystallization should occur of them either saying, well, that's how it was when I grew up, is my mom would always just be there and blah, blah, blah. And that's how I knew that she loved me. And so then you can say, okay, so after this, once they have either said a benefit word or talked around it, then the next thing I'm gonna do is summarize back to them what I've heard. So I'm gonna say, so it sounds like, so that's what the summary is gonna be. It sounds like, or you could say, seems. Oops. Seems like. So it sounds like, or it seems like blank is what you're looking for in the home. So if they were talking about that with the kids, so then I would come back to this feature of the kitchen and say, so it sounds like, or it seems like what's important to you about having the kitchen that we've just talked about is that kitchen provides a way for you to show your kids how much you love them. And then they're gonna go, yeah, that's exactly, that's when crystallization they should connect all the dots of what I'm looking for is a way to show my kids how much I love them. And so I want to buy the house that's going to have my kids feel like I love them. And once you do that, now when I go out and show the house, now I may not necessarily say it as, hey, does this kitchen look like a place that you can show your kids that you love them? But I would say it as, so does the layout and things of this kitchen look like it would work for you to be able to have that time with your kids when they come home from school? Because see, it's not about the number of cabinets that they have or anything like that. The purpose of it in that scenario then is about, I want to show my kids how much I love them and that I'm there for them. And I'm going to do that through this feature, whatever it is. That's why when we go show the property, we focus more on does this look like it would work for you, in order for you to have that time with your kids that you want and be able to, and you could say it as so that they can feel how much you care about them or whatever. That's how we want to do this. So that's what this process really needs to look like in terms of that. So now with that being said, let's run through and talk about the 15 benefit words. So since we just did love, we'll put that as the first one. So now this piece of it.
University is a Christ Center University.
Oh, I was like, I thought somebody was like talking on the.
Ed Milet started yelling at me.
Your what?
Ed Milet started
Oh,
yelling at me.
that's fun. I was just thinking I had turned this down a little bit and I was thinking somebody was talking on the speakers. Okay. So yeah, so these 15 benefit words, we talked about last week, have their roots in the idea kind of the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it's kind of a little different than that. But the idea of this being is essentially what we've found over the last 20-ish plus years of doing this is it typically every feature that somebody has in a home that they're interested in, the benefit that's associated with that feature boils down to basically one of these 15 things. And so it's been organic. And I think I said this before, I actually am going to give you 15, but to some extent, I'm tempted to call it 14 and merge two of them together, but we'll see. I haven't decided yet. So number 2 is and love, and these, the order I'm giving you these in are not necessary. It's just what they're coming to my head as. In fact, I usually have one that I will take me a minute to remember, but I think I'm remembering it right now. So I'll maybe do that one as number 3. But number 2 is comfort. So these two do seem to, especially with moms, do tend to come up for the kitchen. Now, not always is it going to be that, but a lot of times the kitchen tends to be a place for moms to show their kids or their family how much they love them. And so, but it could be dads too. I mean, I don't mean that to be sexist, but to some extent, that is what seems to happen. Okay.
World's changing.
Yeah. So number 3, then I'm going to do the one that I tend to forget. And I know you can spell this a couple different ways, and I never remember which way is the right way, but aesthetics. I know you can do it with an A or without an A, and I think without the A is what this one is, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But the aesthetics. So this is going to be, if somebody's talking about the house and when they're describing it over here, if they're describing it from the standpoint of, I'll give you an example. I had somebody that when I was saying, describe for me your ideal home, and they started talking about it. When they started talking about, they wanted an older home, and they said, and what I really love is the doorknobs that have like etching on the, like when somebody starts talking about etching on a doorknob, the benefit they're looking for is the aesthetics of it. It's what it looks like is what they're looking for. So typically when that's going to be the feature or the benefit, excuse me, to the feature, is they're going to give you great detail about the brick or the way that this arch has to look or whatever. So aesthetics is one. Number 4, let's do convenience. And I'm probably not spelling it right, but you get it. I would say if you can't spell a word more than one way, you're not very creative. Yeah. So convenience. This is, which is funny because I should be able to nail this one. That's one of my benefits. One of the benefits for me when I'm buying a house is convenience. And it's like, so for example, the home that I live in right now, it's interesting because I went to California. I told you to be trained on this, came back from there. And while there, we practiced this. This was a 3-day intense training where we sat and practiced it to make sure we really understood it enough that we could get up and teach it. And as we were doing that, though, I had my broker, my manager, was doing this, taking me through it. Describe for me your ideal home. And as we went through and we talked about the ideal home, one of the benefits for me was convenience. So the home that and it's interesting because I went and did that in 1999. By the end of 2000, I had bought a new home. And I will tell you, it meets this, the benefit that I was looking for. So for example, this is actually probably a good example to show you of how they can show up saying they want a certain feature, but it's not about the feature, it's the benefit. So when before I bought the home I'm in, somebody had asked, describe for me your ideal home. I said, I want a 2-story. It needs to be on a 1 acre of ground, and it needs to have a swimming pool in the basement. Well,
A
so
swimming pool in the basement?
that's what I said I want. Yes.
How do you do that?
Well, so that's the point is that I didn't need that feature, but that's what
Like
when
an
somebody,
indoor swimming pool?
yeah, basically an indoor pool is what I said I wanted, but I said in the basement, and part of that, where that came from, and this is again, to explain this, how this whole thing works. As a kid, I went to my sister-in-law's, so my brother's wife has a brother that was about my age. Well, I think he might be a sister now, but back then he was a brother, but she hasn't had a, what?
New world.
The new world. So, and I had gone with him one day to a friend's house, one of his friend's house, that was just, their parents were very wealthy and they had a pool that we went and swam in the pool and was inside. So, and in my mind, I'm relating to it as in the basement, which is why I say it would have a swimming pool in the basement. Well, so as they took me through this, describe for me your ideal home. It'd be a 2-story on 1 acre of land and have a pool in the basement. Well, then we go through this. So, as you rank, those were the 3 top features of the home, okay? So then if you were my agent and you said, okay, you mentioned having a pool in the basement, tell me more about that. So that's where, starting with a directive here and then coming over to this. Well, so what I said was, at that time, I said, okay. Right then, I would go and was going to Gold's Gym. So I lived in just off 5600 West and 6200 South. I would drive from there to the Gold's Gym, which I don't even know if it's even still a gym, but in Kearns off 5400 South and 40th West, there was a Gold's Gym there. So I would drive from my house to there. I would get out, go in the pool. I'd swim laps. I'd get out. My hair was wet. Well, so let me even back up from that. The truck I had at the time wouldn't fit in my garage at that house. So I would leave in the winter, go outside, it's early in the morning, I'm cold, I would get in the truck, I would drive then to the Gold's Gym, get out, go in, swim, come out, wet hair, get back in a cold truck with wet hair, freeze all the way home. Then I would go get ready and go to the office. So for me, when you say, tell me about the pool in the basement, I was like, hey, yeah, this is what goes on. And I spend more time driving to and from the gym than I probably actually spend swimming. And so ultimately what it came boiled down to is I wanted convenience. The reason I wanted a pool in the basement was about convenience. Well, did the home that I bought, does it have a pool in the basement? No. Do I have an indoor pool? No. But right outside of my backyard is our community pool. And that was good enough for me. Now I would look, the funny thing is that, you know how many times in 20 years I've gone and swam laps in that pool? Yeah, very few. But we also have a 2-mile trail around the house that I go and run. This morning, ran the 2 miles around the trail. Well, that's about the convenience for me. So for me, have the part of what the benefit of the home was convenience, okay? So, but that wouldn't, if you would have just asked me, so why do you want to pool in the basement? I would have just been like, I don't know. I just feel like I do.
I don't know that I've ever seen a pool in the basement.
Yeah, I don't know that I have either, but like I said, it was indoor pools, the idea, but that's how I described it.
Yeah.
Which again, comes back to, and sometimes people will hear that and think, well, you're not gonna be able to, at that time, was like, I wouldn't be able to afford a home with an indoor pool even at that point. So you kind of go, okay, but keep in mind, remember I said, features have a price tag, but the benefits don't. Because you can find it. See, what I wanted was convenience for exercise. It wasn't about the pool. It's not that I needed a pool, and the proof of that is I don't even still use the pool. But the thing I do love about that 2 mile trail is I can go run and I'm not running or with out on the traffic or whatever. It's just the convenience of it, okay? So anyway, that's that one. Number 5 is then safety. Now, this is the one that I think really, and I think I mentioned this last week, but I'm kind of becoming more and more of a believer that safety isn't really the issue that they're looking for. It's number 6, which is security. Or the way I always put in parentheses is peace of mind. Is really what they're looking for, is peace of mind. So when somebody's saying, I want to have a fenced yard so the kids can go outside and play. Well, yeah, it's about the physical safety of the kids, but it gives the parent the peace of mind, which they're buying the house or wanting that feature for the peace of mind, not the safety. Okay. All right. Next, let's see. We'll get this one out of the way. Sex. So that's one, I've had this only come up twice in all the times I ever sat down with somebody. But had a guy from up in Park City, and this one actually came up. It was one of those scenarios where an agent had me, in fact, it was the building just opposite of where we are right now, the glass building. The guy had come down from Park City, had his client meet us, and he took him through the process. He asked him, about the features. One of them was hot tub. He said, so what is it about having the hot tub that's important to you? The guy said, well, it'll be a place for my wife and I to go together and relax. And then the agent said, well, so it sounds like to me what you're looking for in this home is the hot tub to have some great sex. And the guy was like, well, yeah, I wasn't going to say that. So it's okay on this to say romance or, intimate time, whatever, but that could be one of the benefits they're looking for in this home. Okay. Number 8 is let's do prestige / esteem.
I've noticed there's a lot more prestige on east side buyers than west side buyers.
Yep.
West sides are like, I just want a big house and big yard and not have to pay what they pay up there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's me actually.
People up here are like, I'll take a smaller house and a smaller yard just
To say that I live up
Yes.
there. That's exactly right. So prestige and esteem. So that's where, again, and that one is another one that can be sometimes difficult to get people to actually acknowledge that that's what it is.
Yeah.
They'll say, they'll talk around it. They won't always say it, but just know you can say it. So it sounds like what you're looking for is the prestige of the location. And then they will. Yeah, that is exactly what it is. So, all right. Number 9, let's do health. Oh, and let me actually go back real quick, actually, on prestige and esteem. So prestige is about how other people see them. The esteem would be how I see. So how I always do this is if they're talking about that from the standpoint, I'm going to just ask some questions to find out, is it about how you feel when you drive up to the house or when you have people over? And if they say, well, no, it's about me, like driving up to the house and being like, I made it, then it's about their esteem. Okay. All right. Health could be something to do with, and Brenda Lee brought it up, somebody wanting to be higher up the mountain because they wanted to get out of the inversion or whatever. That would be health. Somebody saying I would need a 1-level home is about health because they have bad knees or whatever. Or, which again, back to the pool, the idea of having a swimming pool could be, my doctor told me I need to exercise more and they recommended swimming. So it could be that they need a pool for the health type of things. Okay. All right, let's see. Number 10. What am I forgetting? The further down this list we go, the more I start going, okay, what am I forgetting here? All right, let's see. Can't be struggling yet. Oh. I have to go get my notes. All right. Oh, yes, there we go. We already talked about this value. That was one that we had already talked about. So value is about making money. And then number 11, the next one would be economy. Economy is about saving money. So if the person's talking about buying this property and being concerned, like you were saying, of, hey, we're probably gonna sell in the next year or two. Well, they're probably worried about, hey, being able to make money. Economy is about saving money. So that would be, in fact, I saw an agent that used to be here in our office post something on Facebook recently about how much insulation should I add to my house or whatever. That's about economy. It's about, double pane windows or whatever, like high efficient furnace. All of those things are about saving money. Okay. Number 12. Privacy. So privacy would be just someplace they can go get away. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, let me cheat over here and see what else I'm forgetting here. Okay, yep. Next one, which this is funny because this one actually is one of my benefits for when I'm looking for a house. I can't believe I wasn't thinking of it, but recreation. So recreation would be about, like, for me. So that's the other thing that's funny is I wanted a home on 1 acre when I first started this whole process. I am the classic example of somebody who would have said, who an agent would have said buyers are liars, because I said I wanted 1 acre, yet I bought a home on a 1/4 acre. Well, so you would have, or most agents would have said, well, buyers are liars. You said you wanted 1 acre. I went, because here's why. What happens is in my mind, yes, I wanted 1 acre. Why? Well, at the time of us buying this home, my oldest was probably 8. He was just getting into baseball. And so in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I need 1 acre because I want to be able to go out and let him hit and all that kind of stuff. Well, so here's the thing of how the benefit meets the feature is the benefit was about the recreation. Well, right outside of my backyard is the neighborhood park, which is huge. Like until my son was 12, I could go out there and throw batting practice to him at the park and he could just hit wherever he could hit to. And it wouldn't, like our rule was always with all 3 of my boys was, I'll take you over to the park and you can hit until you hit one into somebody's backyard. The day one goes over, so that was always their goal too, is I want to hit one into somebody's backyard. My youngest son, I never had a problem until my youngest son. And then I had one person that was like, lit me up. But my kid could have been sitting back there. And I was like, well, it bounced over that one. Like, but so with that son, we quit before he actually hit one on the fly over the fence. It bounced over. So anyway, but recreation. So for me, though, that would be the example, though, is I said I wanted 1 acre. But here's the problem. If you would have gone and shown me properties that were on 1 acre, every time you showed me a property, I would have looked at it and been like, I'm not going to have any time to do anything. I'm going to be working in the yard all weekend. So that's what an example of they show up saying they want one thing, but I didn't really want 1 acre. I wanted someplace to recreate.
Now you got 2 acres that you didn't have to take care of.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I pay an HOA fee for it, but I would rather that than me go out and have to do
That's
it.
less than all the money to take care of it and mow it and water it.
Yeah, well, especially because when we moved in,
Good time.
our HOA for that was $55. It's only like 75 now. Like, yeah, we have it great. Although my wife's the HOA president, she was telling me the last couple of days, they're probably gonna have to up it because of inflation and everything. But, all right, the next one is entertainment. So it's about entertaining. So if somebody that likes to have people over to the house and have parties and stuff, that would be about entertainment. And then number 15, what am I forgetting? Oh, yep. This one's another one I feel like I really should probably go down to 13 because this one does happen, but just very rare. Self-actualization. So self-actualization is like basically when I've seen that show up is that they feel like they've accomplished everything that they've wanted to and kind of they've made the pinnacle, which by the way, this is on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's the top one as well. But so those are the 15 benefit words. So here's the thing in the last few minutes here. The idea is we want to take people when they come in from saying, I want a 2-story on 1 acre with a swimming pool inside, distill it down to, for me, what the 2 acres was 2 acres was recreation, pool was convenience, And then the 2-story is peace of mind. Of just like, for me, I like having my bedroom on a 2nd-story window. I don't have to worry about anybody climbing in my bedroom, one of my neighbors had somebody that actually broke into their house and came through their bedroom window, and for whatever reason, that created for me, like, I want to be on a 2nd-story where I don't have to worry about it. So, but that's what I was looking for in a home, was the security. So for example, let's say that if I said I wanted a 2-story because of the fact I don't want somebody climbing in a bedroom window. If you went and showed me a Rambler, that the bedroom, like the home I grew up in, the front yard, so it was a Rambler, but if you were looking at the house from the backyard, it sloped down. So there was a walkout basement. So any bedroom along the back of the house nobody's ever going to climb in it. Although I did as a teenager because it had a tree, but the point being, that's what I was looking for, is that not a 2-story. So they're looking for the benefit, not the feature. So anyway, any questions?
No, the other people that I'm trying to work with, the ones that I think I told you about last week that said, we're not in any hurry to buy unless we saw the perfect opportunity. And she said it would have to be in a cul-de-sac so that our kids can play around, and can't be on a hill because they're on a hill right now and she hates it, and her kids' stuff rolls all the way down the hill. And everything beyond that was basically like, we can work with the rest, like, because they want to buy in Holiday.
Yeah.
So she understands.
So that's probably prestige.
She grew up in Holiday and her family all still lives there. So they live in Traverse and they drive down, she said, like 5 days a week.
Okay, so it could be love.
Yes,
too.
but hers was more the location and her kids' safety.
Yeah.
Rather than, I need this beautiful kitchen and house. And
Yep.
she even said the yard doesn't have to be great, we can fix that up. Like, so she already knows in her head everything she would love to have, she's not gonna afford in Holiday.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so those were, I mean, when I'm looking at places for her, if it's not in a cul-de-sac and it's on a hill, I won't even. Like, cause I just don't feel like those are two things she'll go away from.
But I would say what you want to find out though is why. Why? I mean, you kind of have by saying the hill of the toys rolling down the hill, but what if, and this may be the question to ask, what if I found one that was on a hill? But for whatever reason, the toys weren't going to roll down the hill. To find out, because she might say, oh, well, then that would work. And then that opens up possibility. If she goes, no, there's no way. But if you know, it's really, if you can land on what the benefit is, you can then distill it down to figure out. So what I've given you there is you can keep just printed a bunch of them, but this is the permission. I would always start with that. Use this to fill out the grid. This kind of just gives you open-ended questions, and then here's the benefits.
Okay.
But I would recommend using those as you sit down to do a buyer interview, to walk them through the process, land on these benefits. And then as you talk to her, you don't have to talk about the hill. You talk about the, whatever it is, the convenience of the toys not rolling down the hill or whatever. So you can come in, we're done.
We're having our meeting in here.
I believe so.
Cool.
Right.
Anyway, cool deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So next week, we got Summit Tuesday.
Yep.
And then for whatever reason, I don't think I skipped over class. I don't know why. But
Haven't you usually done that on weeks of summer?
I sometimes do, sometimes don't. Maybe that's why I did is. But I don't remember for sure.
What the list says August 3rd, no class, or is that August 1st?
I switched it. There's an arrow there switching.
Yeah.
Because initially I wasn't going to, but then I went out of town. So I wasn't going to because we had our meeting.
Right.
But then I went out of town, so I'm like, well, I gotta do it on Thursday. Do it for
Cold.
Are you? All right, thank you.
A little chilly in here. You should test them out.
Sure, downstairs. Your office really bad too, Brandon?
I love it. It
Yeah,
was
I don't-
hot and then they changed it and
Now
now
it's
it's
cold.
like I could wear a hoodie. And I
I
like
should
it.
have just traded.
It keeps me
Greg's
awake.
wearing the hoodie, kind of.